What did someone say to you that instantly made you realize their life was in danger? It's getting worse. That's what they said. I went to Walmart, because when I had gone to the store the day before, I had forgotten rat food and water. I quickly grabbed most of what I needed. I just needed to go to the water aisle and then I'd be good to go. When I got there was a man who appeared to be having difficulty. He was standing there, wobbly, confused. He had one bottle of water in his hand, which I imagine he had taken from a package, since there were no single bottles available there. He looked older, maybe 50, or 55, and he had a motorized shopping cart, the one where you sit down in it and it drives for you. I figured, because of this, that he had some disability, and perhaps just needed help lifting heavy objects. I then went next to him and asked, "Do you need me to put this water in your cart for you?" I will tell you now, there are only 2 sentences that I fully understood from him. His response to my first question made no sense. It was mumbled, impossible to make out. He rejected my offer in his own way, and I thought, maybe he just didn't want this brand. Maybe he just wanted one bottle. I didn't want to ask him to repeat himself, in case it was a mental disorder, because I'd bet he'd get really fed up with people treating him differently all the time. But I still wasn't sure if that's exactly what was wrong. I asked him questions for a few minutes, basically trying to see what type of water he needed, but I was getting increasingly worried. He wasn't acting like he had a mental disorder. I then asked him if he was okay, and couldn't understand his reply. Then he wobbled a bit and I said, "I think you should sit down. I will get it for you." After he sat down, I put the package of water in his cart. Then I asked, "Is there anything else I can get for you?" This is where he said the first sentence I could fully understand. "Thank you, dear." He instantly fell asleep, and I put my hand on his shoulder so he wouldn't fall over. He woke up a moment later, and I knew he wasn't okay. I asked him if there was anyone he wanted me to call. I thought at first that he might have been drunk, but this was definitely nothing like that. It was something much more dire. This is when he said the second sentence I understood. He replied, "Yes. It's getting worse." That frightened me. He got out his phone, verifying the fact that this wasn't some disorder. A person with a disorder that severe wouldn't be able to operate a phone, and he definitely wouldn't be at the store alone. He started mumbling nonsense again. He said a few numbers, and I thought it was a long shot that he'd be able to press the numbers on the phone correctly, and I was right. He just tapped on the bottom right-hand corner several times in a row, just pressing the number 9 repeatedly. Then he fell asleep again. So, I took the phone and tried to find the contacts, but I couldn't. Several people had come and gone in the aisle, but I never asked any of them for help because I wasn't sure what they could do. However, I felt an urgency at that moment. I saw a random guy walking down the aisle. I really couldn't figure the phone out, and I figured someone else helping me would be better. Even though the guy was clearly rushing somewhere, I figured, hey, nothing could be as important as this. I said, "Sir?" And he stopped his sprinting and looked back at me. I asked, "Can you help me?" Do you know who that man turned out to be? He was a firefighter. He instantly jogged back over to me, and all of these firefighters, policemen, and medics were suddenly there. A woman shouted, "Is that him?" And sort of looked at me, then looked at him and said, "Is that him?" I said, "I don't know. Something's wrong with him." She said, "This is him." Then she looked at me again and asked, "Do you know him?" So, I told her I was helping him put the water in his cart. Then she asked, "But do you know him?" So I said, "No." Then she focused her attention purely on him. I didn't know whether to give her the phone or not, so I made an obvious move to put it in his breast pocket, and she saw me doing that and motioned for me to give her the phone. And I did. I still had my hand on his shoulder. After they all crowded him, I finally moved away. I stood there for a few moments. I wanted to ask if I could help, but I didn't. Because obviously I couldn't. They were all medics and firefighters and policemen. What could I do for him that they couldn't? So I slowly left. Everyone in the store, I noticed, was in shock. I overheard 2 ladies talking about all the medics, and I asked them what they knew, because, how did they know what happened? I was the only one there when it happened. So, one of the ladies informed me, someone saw a man fall on his face and they called 911. My heart just broke. This is the official end to the story, but it doesn't end there. As I was driving home, I couldn't stop thinking about him, and I began to cry because I felt so bad leaving him there. I didn't know his name. I didn't know what happened to him. I didn't know if he'd be okay. He'd go to the emergency room, and no one would be there for him. When his family or friends came, they wouldn't have anyone there who was with him when this happened. The doctors and police might be sympathetic, but if I stayed with him, I would have been able to tell them that he was cared for and looked after. Only when I was going over what just happened in my head did I realize that when he was pressing 9, he was trying to call 911. That hit me hard. At this point of time, I was feeling horribly guilty for not sticking by him. But then, I realized something. No one was helping him. People saw him struggling, but aside from the person who called 911, I was the only one who stopped and cared for him. The fireman who was looking for him had passed right by us. If I hadn't been there at that moment, if I hadn't stopped the firefighter for help, they wouldn't have found him right then and there. I just regret that I didn't stay. I regret leaving, but I'm happy the medics were there for him. I'm happy I was there for him. I don't know what was wrong with him, but whatever it was severe. He fell asleep talking to me so many times. I heard the medic ask him what his name was, and I knew it was pretty much pointless to ask. He couldn't talk in his condition. People have told me he would remember me. He might have been out of it, but he would know I was looking out for him. He would know I cared. I might not have accompanied him to the doctor. I might not have spent more than just 10 minutes with him in total, but I was responsible for getting him the help he needed, when I could have just ignored him.